So I thought about like 10 inspiring positive things that are going to happen in the next 10 years that will hopefully change everyone's lives positively. And I took from neuroscience the most, I think, remarkable advances that my colleagues and I have been making over the last couple of years. I think it goes up to 10 years ago and mostly in the last 5 years, that I thought would both be remarkable to know about, but also will change your life. So I'm going to try to tell you in what way it's relevant for you. So over the last 10 years, neuroscientists, and there are only a handful of labs that do that, have basically conquered dreams to an extent. What does it mean? It means that we finally are able to extract the content of your dreams while you're sleeping. In a way, dreams have been fascinating for humans for millennia. You can look at hieroglyphs on caves from 3,000 years ago, and people talk about their dreams. The Bible is full of people who attribute dreams to their kind of existence. There are many scientists who say that their answers came to them, like Einstein says that the theory of relativity came to him in his dreams. However, up until about 10 years ago, we had no access to dreams. So all the work of Freud and Carl Jung and many others were not really about dreams. They kind of are thinking of themselves as dream people, but in reality, what Freud had was the story you tell him when you're awake. And what we know for sure is that the way you speak about things when you're awake is colored by your awake language, which means that you lose some of the nuance of dreams. We have studies that were done over the last 20 years that actually show that I can do something to you just when you wake up that will make you incorporate the experience of the awake existence into your dream. Like you would tell a story that you dreamt as if you dreamt it via actually introduce it when you woke up. That's how kind of misleading it could be. And we don't have to go that far. We even know that people who are blind say that their dreams are without vision. It's clear that what you are experiencing as an awake person is leaking into your dreams. The coolest example I could think of is one where in the 1920s, where people were writing dream diaries, everyone wrote that their dreams were in black and white. And only in 1930, when movies started having colors, everyone's dreams started to have colors in them. And presumably it's because people think of dreams like a movie that you see in your brain, so you use the language of movies to describe your dreams, and when movies have colors, people say, I guess my dreams were also in colors. So it's clear that the awake version of you is telling you part of the dream. Which means that when Freud asked someone a question, they got an answer that's actually interesting and relevant, but it wasn't necessarily the dream. And no one had access to dreams up until recently, when we started to poke in people's brains and actually extracting the visuals of the dream. So one thing is to read the dream and actually kind of wake up and kind of give you, here's what you dreamt of, and you can interpret it together, understand it, but you can actually take one step further, and you can go to sleep and say, I wish I could, in my dream, go to Mars with my girlfriend and see something, and we say, no problem, sir, let's poke in your brain and give you this VR experience. So you go to sleep, and for 20 minutes every 90 minutes or so, you get to experience something that you chose. And you can even go further to having Spielberg direct your dreams, or have kind of closure. So your grandma died and you never get to speak to her. You can have her show up in your dreams, and even though it's your brain putting words in her mouth, it feels to you like it's her speaking. So you can kind of have like a discussion with her. We can wake you up during a nightmare and kind of get you out of it. We can navigate things. There are companies who now approach us with ideas that are kind of both spooky, but putting commercials in your dreams, or having a couple go on a date, and then when they show up, instead of just retiring each to their own dreams, continue the date in the dream. So all kinds of cool things that we are thinking might be a possibility there. But the point of idea number one is that dreams moved from a lucid thing that you can't really access to a tangible quantity that now we can play with. Number two is death. I promise it's going to be optimistic, so let me frame it as optimistic. Since 2019, so 5 years ago, we kind of made a big leap in conquering death when it comes to brain. Death, like dying, is a moving target. It's not always the same thing. We kind of have a binary approach to it, like you're either alive or dead, but the reality is that we keep changing what being dead means. 100 years ago, if you would walk the street of Manhattan and suddenly had a heart attack and you fell, someone would assume you're dead, and they kind of put a flag on you and maybe harvest your organs, but you're dead. Because that's it, you have a heart attack, and we know that that's the end of the life. Now, 100 years later, we know that a heart is just a pump that we can replace. We can give you a pig's heart, a valve that kind of works by itself, or a human's heart, an implant. We have many ways to keep you alive without a heart, no problem at all. Now we know that death is when your brain is not active. But even within the brain, over the last 40 years, we keep changing what part of the brain is the part that needs to not work for a certain amount of time for us to say you're dead. It's always in the same region, but it's so kind of different among people that you can actually legally be dead in Las Vegas, be flown to Miami, and be still alive there. Because different states might have different definition of what part of the brain needs to not work for several hours for you to be dead. A very, very highly regarded work, once in 2019, came out, where they, I forget the title of the paper, actually the paper is titled Restoration of Brain Circulation and Cellular Function Hours Post-Mortem. It's very dull, thank you. A very dull title to say that basically what they did is they took people, not people, pigs who died and just kept them alive forever. So here's how it works. Those are pigs at Yale, so people in New Haven, pigs in New Haven, that are in a slaughterhouse. They get slaughtered at 12, and when they're killed, someone quickly extracts their brain, put the brain in an aquarium, and keep circulating the brain through all the things that would keep a brain alive. All the nutrients, all the blood, and basically what they show in this study is that you can make the brain of the pig who died earlier keep processing things for several hours. And not only that, the brain doesn't decay. So this brain, until they basically unplug it and said it's done, these brains were alive. And what it means to be alive is that we can actually look at the brain, it's not just a brain, and realize that these neurons here are the neurons that would respond if the pig would smell something. So instead of having the nose trigger the smells, we just zap the neurons as if smells came from the nose, and we listen to the other part of the brain where the processing happened, and we see that basically the pig in the vat can process the same way it would when it was in a body. So as if the pig is smelling something, it says, aha, it's a weed. So in that sense, the brain can not just sit there and kind of exist, it can also do things that would happen if it were in the body of the pig. The same group is now working on extending the kind of life of those brains and see what we can do, but the point of that, and that's up to now is the science fiction version of that, is that this opens up now a variety of studies, people who basically ask questions like myself, can we do it with humans? That's question number one. Seemingly yes, the brains of humans, brains of pigs are very similar in many dimensions. Most clinical studies on humans start with either pigs or animals that are similar, so in that sense we're already pretty kind of confident that we can take the pigs model and apply it to humans. But more than that, you can ask the question, what can we ask a dead brain that will of human and get answers for? This is where the science fiction comes, but we can imagine that as like a, grandma dies, and we want the recipe for the cookies, and we can keep poking it. So she can't get new information, but she can give us all the inheritance. She can say, yeah, the house goes to you, and the pictures goes to you after she's dead. At the very latest, the funny version, the more kind of applicative version is you can keep the brains of people. Imagine you have someone from 1800 with us, and you can say, how was it being friends with Lincoln, or what was Einstein like? And basically, they're sitting there, and they keep being able to answer questions years after the body is not there. And to the more kind of a humorous thing, you can imagine like a Sherlock Holmes book where there's a dead body, Sherlock Holmes shows up in episode 1, asks the person who killed you, the butler, the end. It's kind of like, it just kind of, you get the brain to answer questions on things that are important. So the science is there, the science fiction is more like playful, but the point is that idea number 2 is that we're now beginning to make strides in changing what it means to be dead, and maybe even eliminating death if we can just keep you alive in some way forever. Idea number 3 has to do with desire. So this research, it started basically a number of years ago when there was this kind of really big headline in the news that scientists created the female Viagra. But really it wasn't the same. The big difference between the male Viagra and the female Viagra is that the male one is your brain wants to have sex, there's a malfunction that you need to fix, and you just make the blood concentrate in one place. That's what you do. So you already have the desire. The female Viagra actually targets the brain. So it basically makes the woman want to have sex, which is more kind of controversial in that it's not obvious what you want to play with. Do you want to play with the mechanics of the body, the plumbing system, or do you want to play with desire? This is why this drug, this medicine, didn't get a lot of traction. It quickly kind of got a lot of flack from a lot of organizations that say basically this is not the same thing. It's more in the realm of roofies than it is in the realm of Viagra. It's kind of like you make someone want something that not necessarily they want. Now, this drug is in the market. You can still get it, but it's still a questionable whether how we think about it as a society. Why? The reason it's interesting is because Ozempic, the drug that now kind of is, some predict it's going to be the biggest kind of investment of 2024, is playing on the same mechanics. it basically doesn't make you, it's not like saying, okay, you want to lose weight or you want to, supposedly diabetes, but like you want to lose weight, let's give you something that's going to make you, it actually makes you not want to eat. And it plays with the same mechanics of like something that we don't understand really. We just know that those drugs, they kind of inhibit your desire for something or excite your desire for something. And so what they do is they change you. And we're okay with that when it changes something that we want to take the drugs. So kind of clearly we're in it, both for the sex and both for the kind of the weight loss. But in the same way, what it does to us is it changes our brain. And this is something that people kind of have like still a gray area-ish approach to what it is. Now, the good news for scientists is that in doing so, we begin to understand how it works. So we know that it does something. We know it makes women feel more aroused. We know that it makes people want to eat less. But up to now, it's kind of like a fluke. We know that it happened, we didn't know why, because there's now a lot of people who take, especially the Ozempic one, we begin to have answers to what is it in the brain that makes you want something, not want something. It becomes a useful tool for other diseases like Parkinson's, where basically it inhibits in a way your desire to do things, so we can start playing there. So in a way, all of this kind of movement to try drugs because of recreational purposes allows us as scientists to understand something profound about how the brain makes choices. Number 4, drugs. So the last, I would say 3 or 4 years, I've had a surge in research, in neuroscience, kind of lab, like academic, old school, on things that were taboo 4.5 years ago, which are drugs. What I mean by drugs I'm not talking about Edwin, I'm talking about MDMA, LSD, and mushrooms. Forever, since I was a grad student, this wasn't on the menu. If you were to come to your advisor and say, I want to do a PhD in magic mushrooms, you would be kicked out. This was like, the 60s was a period, at the time of the winter, it wasn't on the menu. Over the last couple of years, it's having a comeback. Partially politically, there's a lot more acceptance of this, partially because now CBD, weed, marijuana became a lot more acceptable in many states. Other states are beginning to accept other things. It became okay for us to study that in the lab, meaning I can now apply for a DEI kind of license and have the police show up in the lab every morning and drop MDMA in a pure, clean MDMA that they give me a permission to try on subjects, which allowed us to now really explore the use of drugs that were illegal not long ago and still are illegal streetwise to understand the brain. Now, most scientists are still doing that to get the DI license, doing it in context of something clinical, as in a way to help people. For example, I want to study MDMA, but I'm not going to say what I want to do is I want to see how people respond when they're high. What I would do is I would study MDMA in the context of how it helps post-traumatic stress disorders, which is what we do. Or how magic mushrooms are useful to change something that has to do with depression or with addiction. But at the same time, the secondary outcome, which for some is the first, is we can actually ask questions about what does it mean to be high on various stations, what does it mean to be hallucinating, and what does it actually mean to change your conscious state. Most neuroscience, I think, when they go to neuroscience, go there because they care about consciousness. This is one of the best ways to study consciousness. Now, I'll tell you about the most extreme study that I'm kind of involved in, that I think, in my mind, is the most interesting one and pragmatic one, and also has a concrete application. The one we're looking at right now is what I call the In-N-Out drug, named after the burger in California. What In-N-Out is an idea to allow us to find the anti-drug for each of those drugs. So think of it the following way. Take LSD, and you're now extremely kind of high, and you sit, and you have those remarkable ideas. Like you kind of see the next song and you write notes for yourself. You say, this is a good idea, I should remember that. And you wake up the morning after and you look at the notes. This happened to everyone who's been high, even on weed. You kind of wake up to your notes and it says, the ice cream is on the Eiffel Tower. You say, like, what did I mean? Like, I remember yesterday, it sounded like the best idea, so much so that I actually spent time writing it. But now the morning self doesn't understand the evening self, and kind of it's lost on me. Like what it says in the notes is like meaningless. Boy, it would be great if I could for a second relate to the person I was the night before or otherwise. What we suggested is basically to create the antidote of LSD that you can take while you're high, and it gives you 10 minutes of clarity. So it takes you out. So imagine that you're high right now. You have this brilliant idea of an ice cream that is on the top of the Eiffel Tower that actually spills and makes the Eiffel Tower beautiful, making it up right now. And then you say, this is a really good idea. I'm quickly taking the anti-pill, and it will give me the same, I'm still going to be continuously in the same brain that made up the Eiffel idea, but I'm going to go out, be able to write down the idea, make clarity, and it's gonna jump back into the state. So I can basically give myself a window of time, even infinity. I can go out entirely to get out of drugs. Now this is a good idea, both because it's what I told you right now is like a pragmatic way to kind of take the brain that has great ideas and give them to the brain that doesn't have the great ideas. It's also a way to just get you out, right? You take the LSD, and this is a bad trip and you're not enjoying it at all. You can take the other thing and get out. So it could be a good way for people to just help other people. And the way we're selling it right now to get license to do it is it could even be the solution to drinking and driving. So imagine you're going to a bar and you're drunk, you want to go home, you take this anti-pill and it gives you now half an hour of lucidity. You can actually go home while basically. So this is how we kind of say, okay, this is actually not just for people in Burning Man. It can also be something that's useful for any person at 2 a.m. when the bar is closing and you want to get home. So there's actually a pragmatic application for that. So number 5 is in a way what got me into neuroscience. So this is kind of what I'm doing the most. But neuroscientists study the brain in one of 2 ways. The best way to understand the brain is to open the brain, put electrodes inside the brain that are very, very small, like microphones, and listen to the activity of neurons speaking. Neurons are the building block of thinking, and if you want to understand how people think, you put electrodes near those neurons and you listen to them. If you can put many of them in the brain, that's how you understand how people think. Unfortunately, you cannot open the brains of humans and put electrodes inside, so most neuroscientists do that with animals. What they do is they take a pig, a rat, a mouse, a dog, they open their brain, they put electrodes inside, and they study those animals to understand how they think. The thing about those animals is that they can tell you how the neurons work, but you can't ask the dog, okay, but what did you experience, or how did it feel, and so on. That's why we move to humans. With humans, we can actually do a lot less when it comes to putting stuff into our brain. We can actually only imaging the brain from the outside, so we can put the brain in the fMRI or an EEG, but we can't really open one. But we can ask them a question like, what does it feel like? So we have kind of a problem. We have either humans who can tell us everything, but you can't put anything inside their brain, or animals that you can do whatever you want to, but you can't ask them questions. Come Moran. So my lab is one of 3 labs, and it's a niche that actually does exactly that. We take humans, open their brain, and stick electrodes inside the heads of humans. I actually look for volunteers. I came here for this. So we work with a handful of patients who have some kind of unique brain problem that requires surgery to fix. So think of the most extreme version of anything, that nothing worked other than going to a surgeon and having a surgeon open your brain and put electrodes inside to understand how you can solve this problem. These type of people come to my lab, we open their brain, we put electrodes inside their head, and we keep them in the hospital with open brain and wires coming out of their head connected to a machine for several weeks while we try to understand how the problem is manifested so we can fix it. That's the clinical part. But it also gives us a chance to actually have access to a human being with open brain who can talk and tell us stories and interact with us while we actually have access to their brain. There's been only a couple of hundreds of people so far that we had this with, but still it gave us answers to many, many questions like where in your brains are your emotions and how memories work in your brain and how to change things. Very, very interesting kind of insights from that, which led later on most of my students to be offered a job with a lot more zeros in the salary than what we can offer them by Elon Musk. Basically take the entire lab, turn it into a company. So now there's a company called Neuralink that is one of 3 or 4 companies, but that's the most popular one, that actually took our research and turned it into a product. So what Elon Musk is doing, and this is why people know about me, because when he does it now, everyone kind of, now there's a lot of PR around it, and of course there's a lot of money, so they're moving in light speed. Like it took us 15 years to get to where we are, it took them 4 years to catch up and be ahead of us. So what Neuralink is right now doing is trying to take this research and turn it into concrete applications that will be, at step 1, helping people with some kind of problem, fix the problem by essentially restoring the connection between the brain and the body. The classical case that they're working on right now, they already are in the process of getting FDA, they were rejected a few months ago, so hopefully it's going to come back, is they say we can take people who lost the ability to move. So they're in a wheelchair because they had an accident and the connection between the brain and the body was severed, something that happened. So the brain still is intact and the legs are still intact, just no connection between them. So what we say is let's open their brain, put electrodes above the motor area where the instruction to move the legs are, read them with this device, project this instruction to the muscles in the leg, and essentially make the person rise up again and walk. The idea is that if this works out, no more people in wheelchairs, no more people with all kinds of motor problems, because we can basically restore all of those things by connecting things again. As long as you had it before, we can give it back to you. That's the FDA approval that they're seeking, but the reality is, from my understanding of the approach, they are much more ambitious and also, pros and cons to it, also much less careful. What they're really after is connecting everyone's brains to machines. The idea is, why stop with people who are in a wheelchair? If we can open everyone's brain, put electrodes inside everyone's head, a neural implant, replaces your phone, and you can just connect it straight to the cloud, and you drive your car, you want to get to Lenox Hill, you don't know how to get there. Right now you would kind of type in your phone Lenox Hill, press send, it will go to a Google map, come back to you with an answer. Instead you would just kind of think, oh, I want to get to Lenox Hill, how do I get there? The how do I get there would translate to a brain talking to a cloud, asking a question, the map is going to come back to your brain and just say, oh yeah, of course I have to go right. Not knowing that in the process of you kind of thinking about it, you consulted the cloud and got answers, and maybe there was a bidding between 5 companies on who gets to give you instructions and what store you're going to see on the way. But the point is that the aim, according to me, not according to the official Neuralink answer, is to connect your brain to the cloud so you will have full kind of access to the world. If you ask Neuralink, they would say that's not the aim, we're really just about helping patients, but since my students are occupying most of the positions there, I can tell you what they're kind of seeing. Bottom line is the use of language right now is not of that of a brain surgery like we use in the lab, but LASIK surgery. LASIK surgery is the surgery that you get if you have glasses and you want to kind of fix the retina. You can get it in any street corner. Like you go to an optometrist, you say on LASIK surgery, they give you local anesthesia, they basically kind of with a laser do something, and then your eyes are restored. The point, I think, of Elon Musk using this terminology is to say, oh, it's not really a brain surgery, it's like a thing you can get in the street corner, which would make any person say, oh, I guess I can do that. And in that sense, it becomes a lot more recreational. Like I think his hope is to get all of you to accept that. And if you ask me right now, I would say that it's a risky surgery and I wouldn't recommend. But by referring to it as LASIK surgery, I think it kind of becomes, and I know that when he kind of as a joke posted on Twitter at some point, I'm looking for, like I did with you, I'm looking for volunteers. He had 100 people who basically said, me. So people are ready to do it. Okay, this was idea number 5, neural implants. So I think that the future would be more and more stuff going into your brain to help you communicate. There's right now 40,000 people in the world that already have neural implants for different purposes, epilepsy, clinical depression, deep brain stimulation, and so on. The numbers are going to go higher, and with them we're going to have more people that actually have a device in their head that you can upload and download content for. Idea number 6, my favorite up to now, is what we call sensory addition. We think that we experience reality. We think that you see this room, you see people, you see dresses, you see shirts, you see lights, you think this is reality. But the truth is that what you actually see is only 10 trillionths of what reality actually is. We only see the things that our sensors can capture. What I mean by that, your eyes only capture 1/10 trillionth of the type of lights that are in the room right now, because the eyes can only see infrared to ultraviolet. That's the spectrum of light we can actually capture, what we call the visible light. There are right now in this room microwaves and radio waves and X-rays and gamma rays. They're all here. We just don't experience them because our sensors, the eyes, can't capture them. In the same way, there are sounds here that are here, but because our ears are tuned to only accept compressions of air in certain frequencies, we think this is what sound is. But if there was a dog in this room, the dog probably hears different things that we don't really hear because it's just other frequencies that we can't capture. So more and more we understand that there are different sensors in the world that we can even build devices to capture, but not experience them ourselves. For example, if a bat was in this room right now, the bat would see all of this cell phone light that goes into a tower from your pockets right now, and it would fly between those. So the bat would sense all those beams, and it would fly between them because they're obstacles for the bat, but not for you. But here's the cool thing. The brain of a bat, the brain of a human, the brain of a snake, of a bird, all of those brains are the same on the inside. There are more neurons in the human brain, they're folded differently, but the machinery and the mechanics of how they speak are the same. Which means that all the devices we have to capture the world are only ways to translate reality into the language of the brain. Your eyes, they capture photons from the environment, they turn them into the language of the brain, which is language of electrical impulses, and then the brain sends it to the right part of the head, and that's where you turn it into what we call seeing. The ears turn pressure in the air into the language of the brain, then it goes to the auditory cortex, and this is what we think of as hearing. But those are just devices, plug-and-play devices that we plug into the brain that do processing for us. And because nature has many, many different approaches, in 2018 people started to say, why if we try to take a sense from one animal, plug it into another, and see what happens? So what they did was they took the whiskers of a cat. Whiskers of cats are kind of like accelerometers. They know the cat is aligned. They basically pluck them out of the cat and plug them into the brain of a ferret. Ferrets don't have accelerometers. And what happens is that the ferret still gets bombarded by signals from a device it doesn't know what to do with in the beginning, but its brain over time learns to make sense of that, and before long you have a ferret that starts to know when it's balanced or not. And this opens up a Pandora box of us understanding that we can actually take any sense that is out there in nature, plug it into our brain, and if it fits the brain, so to speak, and if there's real estate to process that, the brain will learn how to make sense of that. And we knew it's going to work because we had people already in the real world right now that lose senses, we give them back. Like if you become deaf, we can put a cochlear implant. This is a device we build, plug into your brain in a different way than the ears work, and we just let your brain process, and after a few months you get to hear again. We now have similar clinical trials in California, where you take people who lost their sight, they're blind, you put cameras in where the eyes are, those cameras turn photons into the language of the brain, and after a few months those people learn to see again. They're not seeing perfectly, they kind of see blurry and so on, but they get, everyone in Zoom I assume is Jewish, so we can make fun of Christians. The last guy who gave sight to the blind became God. So now basically people at UCLA get to play God every day when they take blind people and just give them their sight back by plugging their cameras into their brains. And the point is that once we did that, we realized that we can do it with anything. So any sense that Mother Nature has is on the menu for us, which means that now there are more and more scientists who basically start to do, only with animals, experiments where they try to see first if you can replace senses, rewire them, but also if you can enhance the sensory experience. If you can have humans see through this wall and have a TSA person who can just look at you when you scan and say like, no bombs here. Or if we take the noses of dogs and plug into the human brain and just kind of get, okay, there's a bomb somewhere in this room. All of those things that we know nature has, but we never try to explore. This is idea number 6, my favorite so far. Idea number 7 is that this is a project that we've been working on for the last 3.5 years through the Biden administration's effort to change the nuclear protocol. And the idea here is that there are more and more people who are in senior position who would benefit a lot from understanding how their brain works. And if you're in this room and you command a lot of power in your decision-making process, it's probably beneficial for you as well. We know that there is no correct way to be thinking, but there is a correct one for you. Some of you are morning people, some are evening people. Some make decisions better when you're hungry, some when you're full, some when you're with people, some when you're alone. Some of you just before the deadline, others you need more time. But the point is that for each brain, there is the optimal state. And for the first time, we can actually measure that. So we can come to our lab here at Columbia, and someone will put something on your brain and scan you for several hours, doing all kinds of things. We will give you at the end the answer. We'll say, Leslie, if you're on the board of a company and you're about to make decisions, make sure you do it only between 8 to 9 when you're full with this person in the room, and that many. So, and in a way, we can start giving you brain assessments. Now, this is where I should be a little bit careful. There are tons of companies that will sell you snake oils. If you just look for brain assessment, you'll find dozens of companies that do that. There are only a handful who do it right, but it's now on the menu. So most companies are crap to do that. It's kind of like, because you don't know how to assess that, they will sell you and say, come to us, we're going to look at your brain. Yes, you have a brain that requires a lot of like Scientology advances, and kind of come to us, we're going to give you more. But some labs are really doing it really, really well, and we now have the ability to essentially get you a good assessment of your brain. So new concrete advance is what we call brain profiling, which is a tool to give you answers to how you operate better. Not only that, we can now use it to, I wouldn't say predict behaviors that are in the future, but definitely answer questions that are in the present but impactful. I'll give you a concrete example. I spoke about drinking and driving before. If you drive your car and you're drunk, we can stop you, we do a simple test, and we can tell you you're drunk, you can go to prison. But if you're tired, there's nothing we can do. There are probably more people who died because they fell asleep while driving than they were drinking. But the police cannot stop you in the street and say like, you seem too sleepy to drive. Even if you do, there's no kind of law against that. We kind of tell you don't do it, but like we can't stop you. Because partially we don't have a meter for that. So now what scientists are doing is what kind of meters, like you can be talking on the street, someone puts something on your head, they say you can't drive anymore, you're too sleepy. And in that sense, we have now the ability to use this profiling not just to give you access to your better self, but also tell you if you're doing progress. You're going to therapy and you have to think of a scenario differently. Up to now, it was kind of for you and for the therapist to know if it's working out. Now we still, this is too far science fiction what I'm saying right now, but we can give you some kind of progress meter, saying, yeah, something in your memory is changing. We don't know if it's positive or negative, but we can actually make kind of assessment of your brain and tell you what happens and what works. with feedback, we can actually use it to even improve. Idea number 8, we now have enough understanding of how the brain biology is working to do something that's kind of resetting the brain. So here, the idea is that there are some sets of neurons that essentially stabilize over your life. So if you think about it kind of in a very visual way, the way I imagine it, when you're born, your brain is very volatile. A lot of things change between the ages of 0 to 17. Kind of everything's on the menu. You try things, you change. It's like very, very volatile, and it starts being less kind of amplitude is lower and lower. At some point, age 17, 25, somewhere there, you kind of stabilize. Your personality is fixed. Who you are is set, and now you can even change your personality, but in very small ways with a lot of effort. You can't really acquire mother tongue anymore. Whatever you learned up till this point is mother tongue. Everything else is like you translate to your mother tongue and speak it. You can't really learn certain accents that are not part of your vocabulary mechanically. Whatever you learned up until this point is now who you are, and everything else is like you get improvement in small kind of delta from the setup that you are right now. What it means also is that you have a stroke. If you have a stroke at age 3, you're basically going to wake up after a few days and go back to normalcy. Right, like your brain is going to find a way to recover and rewire around it. Plasticity would happen in light speed and steroids, and essentially, you have a stroke, you lose function. A few days, months, weeks after, you're back to yourself. If you have a stroke at age 80, you probably will never come back to some functions. Like you might lose the ability to walk or to speak. It's going to be very hard because the brain doesn't change much. Like your stroke kind of removed connections, and the brain doesn't recover from that. This idea that I understand loosely is that we can actually give you the right biological kind of experience that will do this shock to you at age 80, essentially will start this oscillation, so you can at any point in your life restart to build neurons. The solution with the good thing is that it will mean that if you have a stroke at age 80, we can actually let your brain recover from that. The bad news is that nature chose to stabilize that over time so that we live most of our life with a stable brain and less volatility, and you won't take risks at age 80 that could kill you, and you won't become a different person at age 80. So now we're kind of playing with this Pandora box of allowing you to really start over at age 70 brain-wise, which maybe is a bad idea. Okay, this was idea number 8. Idea number 9, about 2012 here in New York, a professor at NYU essentially made a huge leap in taking us one step further towards understanding how memories work. We used to think memories work kind of like a file in a computer, where you get to an experience, you write in the file and you press save, and now this is it. There's a file in the memory, and you now carry your memories. What we learned in 2012 roughly, and then in the last 12 years even more precisely, is that actually memories work more like they're volatile. As in the file, right now you got to an experience, it gets stored in your brain in the form of an experience, and you have it in the memory. If someone tomorrow asks you to tell them about tonight, what you do is you basically open the file and you tell them a story. But what we learned also is that you physically move the file in your brain from one location to another. To speak it, you actually have to move it to a different part of the brain to create a new set of kind of connections, and then use the memory from the speaking part of the brain. So it's like the file is moved into a different folder where it's being used, and then when you're done using it, the file gets copied back to the original place. Here's the thing. The file that gets copied back isn't the same file, it overwrites the original. So if during the conversation some ideas leaked the memory and change it, the version that you keep now is the modified version that came with more information. And if someone asks you in 2 weeks about this evening, you won't use the original version, you will tell them the modified version, version 2. And then again, while you talk about it, you're going to introduce more changes, and you overwrite, and that's version 3 now. And basically, every time you use a memory, it also gets changed with the context of the right moment. Cynical joke we tell behind the scenes, not in front of cameras, is that the best memories are kept in the brain of people with Alzheimer's because they never use them. And in that sense, they're perfect. We can't use them, we can't access them, but they're fixed, they don't change anymore. And every one of us that uses memories essentially keeps changing them. So the memory is as good as the last usage, and if you use it a lot, you change it a lot. Now, this is not a bug, this is a feature of the brain. It's basically a mechanic that the brain gave us to deal with bad memories or bad experiences. Instead of just leaving them again and again, it's just like your boyfriend dumped you and you just keep thinking about it, you actually can now go to your therapist, and the therapist asks you to tell me about the boyfriend, and you just load the memory, move it here, and she asks you to tell her story of the boyfriend, and you tell her story, and you open the memory, and then if they're a good therapist, she would say something like, well, you know, he was always a jerk, and she would say something that will now link it to the memory, and then you leave the session, and it's overwriting the original. And then you come back a week after, and she says, let's talk about the boyfriend again. You load version 2, again you talk about it, the therapist again gives a different lens, and then save it again, and by 6 meetings, you kind of have a memory that's totally shifted to a better version of that. trauma is a failure of the system. Trauma is basically when the memory is not being resaved. You keep loading the memory, and you keep seeing the people in the tank exploding again and again because you can't really change that. So now that we understood this thing, the main learning was that there was actually a moment in time where memories are literally being carried from one part to another and then sent back. Which meant that what Joe Ledoux, the scientist who came up with this, could do is it could actually give you a drug that we inject in your brain right when you stop using memory, and then instead of it being saved, it just gets destroyed. So basically, you move it from here to here, you talk about it, or you use it in whatever way, and then you think that now it's time to save it back. But if I give you a drug, I basically stop it from happening, and then it's lost. So essentially, we can actually erase memories. I can make you use a memory, and by you using it, you yourself pulled all the components from all of the brain, talked about it, and because I stopped it from being resaved, you think that you saved it back, but you didn't, and then it's the last time you used it. So I tell you, you go to the therapist and you talk about your ex-boyfriend, that's the last time you actually remember him because now it's not going to be resaved. So once we understood this, we basically understood not just that you can erase memories, but also when memories move in the brain, which meant that there's now a battery of scientists who are looking at all kinds of ways to copy memories, duplicate memories, drop memories or download memories, all the things you want to do with memories because we now know when they move. And before we always thought that you have to kind of find the memory in your brain and spread over all those things, because we now understood that there are moments where it's kind of your brain does all the effort of moving it one place to another, we can just capture it in this moment and do a lot. This actually helps people with Alzheimer's right now. This is the guy who's kind of spearheading this effort at USC, Ted Berger. He's basically building devices that will capture the moving memories in the brain and learn how they look. So when you lose them over time, you just have a copy in your brain that could actually act as the original. You wouldn't even know that you lost your memory because whenever you try to retrieve it, the chip is going to give you the memory as if it comes from within. So the idea is that we now have a step towards understanding memories, controlling them, and making them into a commodity. The big leap here isn't just in understanding how memories work mechanically, is it understanding that we can actually change how we are. If you think about it, most of us are living in the past. So the present is about 1.5 seconds long. Every 1.5 seconds, your brain takes everything that happens and stores it in memory, and most of what you think of yourself is just a collection of all of those historical events into a narrative. We rarely kind of come clean to the moment and kind of say, let's think about it. Mostly we say, okay, how do I stay consistent with who I was before? If you go to vote tomorrow, you won't say, okay, starting fresh, let's assess the two candidates and see who I choose. You kind of say, okay, all my life I voted for Democrats, all my life I voted for Republicans. I basically look for the option that's consistent with my past. You don't really start over. So if I can change your memories, I don't just change kind of a small thing, I can make you a different thing. Like you've been a Democrat all your life, I rewrite the memory to be a Republican, you go to the booth and you say, okay, I've been a Republican, so I should vote. So you kind of change, so changing memories is in a way a small thing that you can do to mechanics to help something, but really the assumption is that when you get to do it with humans, you might be able to change people's entirely. Like I make you not think that you are who you are, and in doing so, I just change course of action. You got a glimpse into what I think is the future. I hope you're as excited about it as I am. And my last sentence is, if you are, you failed. Because the point of this 45 minutes isn't to just tell you how great it is, tell you that it's like ambivalent. All of those things are fantastic in terms of like how we discover them in so little time and how it kind of changes everything, but they're also terrifying because for almost every idea I told you, I can easily see a company abusing it in a very bad way, or an authoritarian regime using it in a very bad way, showing you ads in memories, making you vote for the wrong person because I'm changing your memories, making women want something they don't want. All of those ideas have a very kind of double-edged sword, and the reason they're with us is because the race has begun and there's no way to stop it. Like kind of someone is doing it, so we might as well try our best to explain to everyone and have you weigh in on that. But where it's at right now is that it's not really mainstream solution. So if you take one thing from this kind of session, is that it's in our and your hand to kind of say, hey, do I like these ideas? Do I kind of want to invest right now in Neuralink? Or do I want to go to Congress and say, like, you've got to stop this guy from using it because I don't think it's a good idea? I don't have an answer for that, or I have a personal answer, but not the official answer. But I think this is the take-home message from this talk. Thank you very much.